Welcome to Creators Corner, a Charlevoix Circle of Arts YouTube series where we highlight a new Michigan-based artist every second Monday of the month. Hello, I am Ebony Amber, your host of Creators Corner here at Charlevoix Circle of Arts, and today our special guest is Craig Mitchell-Smith. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thanks for inviting me. I was happy to come.
Of course. And Craig had an exhibit here at the Circle in spring of 2023 entitled Garden of Glass, The Art of Craig Mitchell-Smith. During this exhibit, he led several student field trip tours, and he also did a guided nighttime showing of the exhibit as a fundraiser for the gallery, with all the glass pieces specially illuminated. For the Circle of Arts juried bridge show, Craig was a judge, and he currently has his art featured in the gallery. That's lovely.
Yes. Yeah.
Very cool. So we mentioned the Garden of Glass and how you specially illuminated it for the fundraiser. Could you tell us about how you discovered that specialty, how you could light your glass pieces and make them that much more amazing?
That all comes back to my theater background. For many years I worked as a set designer. I worked as many things, but I was a floral designer, a landscape designer, an interior designer, but I particularly loved doing sets. They never made a living in it, but I loved making the worlds for people to inhabit. And then I would make these worlds, and then I would be amazed as the lighting people would take what I'd done and just make it absolute magic. So I'm like, oh, how'd you do that? Oh, what's this color called? How do you do this? Oh, and how much percentage of this? And what does this do? And so I started playing with Roscoe gels long before I ever played with glass. So I'd been playing with these, the gels that are used on theatrical lighting to control the color of the light. And that informed the glass making from the beginning. So there's always been this interplay of glass and light. Some of my earliest work was about glass that only completed an image with its own projected shadow. So I've been working with light forever, but to bring it into a space like this, inside, I've done these pieces, all my garden shows have been illuminated outside, but this is the first time we've had the space and the right conditions to do an illuminated show inside a space. And it was a one evening event, but it was really lovely. I had a fabulous time.
Yeah, so how did you do that? Did you plan beforehand, or did you have to come into the space and see how everything would work with the particular lighting and stuff?
What I did was I bought more lighting fixtures. They've changed so much. I mean, it used to be that when you would be doing theatrical lighting, you'd be cutting Roscoe gels. Well, now it's all LED, and you tell it the color frequency that you want the light to be. And they're now, pretty inexpensive, and I could buy battery-operated ones, and I could choose the precise color of light that went on it. And one of the things I learned in theater is, say you've got a red piece of glass. We had a geranium that was lovely. And they're on stainless steel frames, so if I threw red light on it, the structure looks just the same as the glass. You lose the magic of the piece, and red light on red glass just kind of cancels each other out and gives you just a hole in the light. So you learn that you go to either side. And so if I'm lighting something red, I'll put an orange and a purple spot on it at different angles. And then the opposite would be a green, and so I'll bring in a third light that's the exact opposite on the color wheel. So there's a lot of color theory that goes in it. So I'll talk about glass, color, light all day. I'm still known for my glass work in that I work almost exclusively in transparent glass. I don't use opalescent glass. Transparent glass is glass that you could put over a printing and still be able to read through. And a lot of glass is translucent or opaque. And I've always been fascinated by pure color.
And so you were a theater designer and a home designer?
Floral design. I was always a designer. I was always interested in how things look. Beauty always made me happy. So I've always been attracted to shiny, beautiful things, and especially color. I remember scooching my head under the Christmas tree when I was 3 years old to just look up at all the dazzling colored lights. And I remember chastising my mother at age 6 because she bought all white Christmas lights, and I just thought, what was the point?
Yeah, I still feel that way.
So color has always been a love of mine. So when I found glass, it just built on this love of color and playing that I've done with color for 30 years before I found glass.
And it reminds me of glass ornaments and the whole Christmas thing. But so what was that transition for you? What brought you into creating these beautiful pieces out of glass?
I came to glass in 2006. It was I was working in the design field. I'd never really contemplated anything in glass. I just loved glass. I collected glass. I had a lot of shiny things around my house. And then I took a class at Delphi Glass in Lansing, Michigan. A friend of mine had signed up for the class and ended up, there's a scheduling conflict. She couldn't take the class, so she offered it to me.
Wow.
And so I said, oh, sure, I'll do that. That sounds interesting. Well, from the very beginning, I was annoying my teacher because I kept saying, well, can't it be fluid? Can it be dynamic? And how can I get this shape? And how can I do more complex work? And can it be thinner? And can it, all of these things that were running on in my head. And I remember the teacher was annoyed with me, and at one point she said, I asked her if she could do something, and she said, well, why don't you get your own damn kiln and find out? And like the next week, I was in contact with HGTV, and through an email exchange, they realized I was doing some interesting glass. And they ended up basically saying, after this 1 hour-long telephone conversation, that in 9 weeks they would fly out a crew to film what I said I would make. And I didn't own a kiln. None of this was real. This was just something I could see in my head. And I borrowed the money and I bought a kiln and I started making glass. And I somehow already knew how to do this. I did not have the sharp learning curve where it took years to perfect this. The 10,000 hour thing did not apply to me. I somehow immediately knew that glass was my thing. I knew it in that class. The teacher in that class, they were only letting you use scraps of glass. And so they had this bucket filled with shards of glass. And the teacher was like, now here are tongs for this, and here are these special gloves. And I just put my hand in the bucket and I went, no, I like this one. I like this piece. And she just stared at me. And I said, well, it's not going to cut me. It's glass. I just knew the material and it worked from the beginning.
Wow.
So I just started making glass.
Sounds very serendipitous. That
A lot of things lined up,
very
like
much
somebody
so.
wanted them to.
Yeah, that's
It's like, go here. Oh, this is the next thing to do. That's very logical. You know?
And so it seems that you really like to create natural elements like flowers and pieces like that have a lot of that flowy.
I'm a nature boy. I'm a gardener. I just want to be outside as much as is humanly possible, in nature. And I'm thrilled by the shapes and the movement of nature. So everything that stays with me, there's a rhythm to life, and that's what I try and build in my work.
So what was it like for you when you found that technique that you could create those pieces that you were bugging your teacher about doing?
I had this huge, overwhelming, get out of my way everything else moment where this is what I wanted to do. I knew this is what I wanted to do, and everything else just felt like it was in the way. And so I realized that I have to make this as my living. So I had the additional pressure of knowing that if I was going to give everything to this new love that I had found, I had to use it it had to pay my bills from the beginning. So I had no choice than to be a successful artist from the beginning. It took all my time. There was no time for a job. This just consumed me. And I did. From almost the very beginning, in the first year, I was actually able to make a profit in the arts.
Wow, that's pretty amazing.
Because I had no choice. I had no choice. It would not have worked the same if I had had, a cushy, if I'd had money behind me, if I'd had any kind of security, it would have been very different.
So what about the people around you? Were they thinking, oh boy, Craig's going crazy, he's giving up?
Interesting. I had a lot of people rooting for me, and some not. So it was a winnowing experience too, to realize that who's willing to help and who wants to keep you just the way things were.
Well, change is scary, but it sounds like you just jumped in 2 feet, in the water, and we're just going with it because it felt like something you already knew, and you had this.
It almost felt like, had I been, I don't know if there's reincarnation because I can't remember those details, but when I already knew how to do something that nobody had done before, that was a remarkable thing to deal with, and an obligation. I felt immediately, because people were telling me, I've been working in glass for decades and I've never seen anything like this. I don't know how you did this. And so I immediately felt this obligation that, well, this is what you have to do.
So
You've been given a gift.
Yeah. Is there a spiritual aspect to it for you?
Oh, it is when I'm working.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. When I'm working, when I'm in my studio and I am just creating, is the oneness of the creator that I feel is in the act of creating. It is pure generosity and joy for me, and mixed with hard work.
Right. Do you ever surprise yourself in the end?
Yes, with failures and and some wonderful secret surprise. I'm still learning things. I've developed a new technique in the last week.
Wow.
That then what I do is I develop these techniques and then I teach them. So I travel all over the world and teach these specialized classes to glassmakers and show them my approach to glassmaking is just very different than anybody else's. I used to be a painter, so I think like a painter. So I cut glass in the shape of brushstrokes. And then, so the habits, that I learned as a painter, I'm drawing with shards of glass because it won't cut me. So I can lay out these hundreds and hundreds of shards of glass and paint with them. And then through the science of glass, you have to know how to heat it. You have to know the coefficients of expansion. You have to know so many criteria about the glass and how different colors move differently and react differently with other colors, and what speed you can heat things up and how much to anneal it and how to anneal it. And there's 1,000 technical questions that I won't bore you with, but there's encyclopedic knowledge of the chemistry and the physics of glass that I didn't have to learn. I somehow just knew. Huge time saver.
That's wild. So you were a painter. So have you always been creative
Always, from the time I was a little kid, and a gardener. I've always been someone who wanted to be in the dirt and plant. I can't wear gloves. I always check my nails before I do anything, because
you got to get your hands on things. I've got
to get my hands in things. I'm very, very hands-on. Everything I do is with my hands.
Do you like to cook?
Yeah, I love to cook.
It sounds like you would like to cook too.
It's just another fun thing to do with your hands, and then you get to eat it.
So how did you get into painting?
Always wanted to, even as a kid. And then what I liked doing best was big. I didn't want to paint canvases. I liked painting worlds.
Okay.
I always went big. So my favorite thing to do was the back proscenium wall of a theater. And so if I could do a big job where I had to be on 16-foot ladders and using spray bottles of water and pure pigment, and I loved the theater of doing all of that. And I also loved the freedom of knowing that nobody's going to see it from closer than 30 feet up. So there was a freedom of not having to be a fine painter. You could be an expressive painter instead. And there's a wonderful way of stepping back to get things to really come into focus. I do a lot of work that looks best from many feet away. So the big garden work is really designed to be seen from 25 or 30 feet away. We keep people away from the work in the garden presentations.
Wow. Yeah, well, all of your work that I have seen and very close up looks just as good here as it does 30 feet away. It's really beautiful. And speaking of your glass work as well, you don't just create flowers. You have insects, you have birds, you have
the shape of water,
fire.
Shapes. What you see in these shows is what people want to see in these shows. So when I do the garden shows that I lease to American public gardens and museums, those pieces are calibrated to nestle into a given environment, to knit with it, to look like they grew from it, and to, frankly, make people happy. I have there's a target. When people are going through a garden, I want to bring them together, and the one thing people do not disagree about is beauty. So I only show them beautiful things that make them think about not just the thing, but the context that they are. One of the things I put in my promotional stuff when I'm dealing with new gardens is that I want to make commas for the garden, not exclamation points. I want to make a place to stop and pause instead of this, I do some really big stuff, but I want to integrate those in as well so that it's not just, look at me.
Right.
I want you to turn a corner and see things, and maybe even walk past stuff. I love to hide pieces. I've done some large sculptures that people have walked right by because in the environment, people didn't look out of place.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Well, one of your pieces that I couldn't possibly walk by is called Tuesday's Child. It's one of my absolute favorite pieces of yours, though I love all of your pieces, but this one really was so special to me. Could you tell us more about that piece and how that came to be?
Glass is where I found my voice. And I was 44 years old until I started doing glass, and I had not said much in my life. I didn't express myself. I didn't talk about personal things. And I realized that I could speak with the glass in my artist statement. I hate artist statements, but I actually like how concise mine is. One of the things it says is glass is the medium used to make my work, not only just in the material, but the voice through which the spirit speaks, like a psychic medium. And I realized I really can communicate with these objects. And Tuesday's Child was right when I found that vein. So that was probably 2008. So I've been making glass just about a year, and I'm a visual person. I see pictures in my head. I know what's real and what isn't, but I see crystal clear photographs in my head that I can turn upside down and backwards and review for years. I didn't realize that wasn't common thing. Anyway, I was jogging on the track at the Y in 2006, and I have a strange memory, and I suddenly remembered that old rhyme: Monday's child is fair of face, Tuesday's child is full of grace, Wednesday's child is full of woe, Thursday's child is far to go, Friday's child is loving and giving, Saturday's child works hard for a living, but the child born on the Sabbath day is blithe, bonny, good, and gay. And I'm just jogging my slow jog on the track, and saying this, and when I said Monday's child is fair of face, I saw a crystal dollhouse where the facade, perfect mullioned windows, 6/1s and shutters and shingles, and exquisitely detailed, and I could look right through this house, and the interior walls were these ghostly drawings of vacuous heroin-addicted fashion models.
Wow.
And like,
That's
so I just
pretty-
saw this, and then
pretty
and it
specific.
stayed, and then Tuesday's Child is full of grace. I saw that completed, and what Tuesday's Child, which is the favorite thing I've ever made. So I'm truly touched that you even saw it. Really, some things hide in plain sight, and so it's loud to people. Some people like you, it was loud to you.
Very
it's
much.
silent to most people. It's a different experience. Anyway, so Tuesday's Child is full of grace. So I was thinking about grace, and I was raised, rigid Roman Catholic, where it was in this building, in this church only. That's the only place to find God, and I didn't think they were very nice people. So I thought, well, there must be no God. Well, decades later, I'm in a forest and found, oh yes, there's grace. And so I realized that a Gothic arch is this, and an elm tree is this. And so in that piece, you can tell that I used to be a set designer because it morphs in these different facades. The front facade is a Gothic arch church with all the symbolism built in. The 3 arches, the rose window with the 12, all the symbolism built in. And then the second facade, plane of glass, carries that line of one half of the arch, but it starts to branch. And they grow into this beautiful tree, and whether the tree is morphing into the church or the church is morphing into the whichever is entirely up to you. You can rotate the piece and tell the story either way.
It's really remarkable. I love it.
So that's that.
So do you have any pieces in mind that you haven't created yet that you've got working in there?
Of that series, there's hundreds of pieces in my head that I'd like to have time to actually complete. So that whole series, Wednesday's Child, stopped me because I don't want to make a black dollhouse with a trapped child trying to get out to the light. But it's what I saw. But yes, all seven of those are in my head. The images will stay, and as long as I keep my mind, the images will stay. And I'd love to revisit those pieces and make them all real.
Well, you are a prolific artist. So how do you choose which pieces that you showcase and which ones you don't?
I changed when I started, I was doing a lot of political work. The work was very personal because I just found my voice, and many people did respond to it. But
with the glass,
yes,
okay,
yes, and not the pieces that people were necessarily buying, and I had to make a living. And I also realized that the work was polarizing, and so I had a really interesting experience with a piece I did called Faggot, and everything's a story. I'm Irish. Everything's got a story behind it. So I was in the American Textile Museum in Washington, D.C., and with my then partner, and there was this garment on a mannequin, this ecru-colored linen garment, and it had these long sleeves, and embroidered on them were bundles of twigs. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. What's that? And this woman behind us said, "Faggot." I'm like, "Pardon me?" And instead, she was the curator, and she said, no, this was and then she went on to explain that during the Inquisition, heretics, elderly women, witches, and homosexuals were burned at the stake, and they were forced to carry their own kindling for their own immolation. Well, the word only stuck with one group of people.
Okay.
Which I found fascinating linguistically. And so then I did this piece that was called Faggot, and I was juried into a museum show with Rene Ricard and Jenny Holzer and Barbara Kruger and Renee Rausch and all these, and Andy Warhol and me. But I did this piece called Faggot, and what I did was I built politicians' or preachers' dais. And all the other work was flat work, so it was all on the walls, and mine was the only sculptural work. So right in the center of this big gallery room, we made it a deliberately uncomfortable experience. We put the spotlights in the viewer's eye, and you would have to approach this podium to experience the piece. And you'd have to stand in front of this podium as though you're addressing a crowd of people. And of course, at opening night, there was a crowd of people. And so on this podium, where you'd expect to see print material, were these black iridescent stick figures all bound in leather. So I'd made faggot, which is also a bundle of sticks in the word etymology. Also the root word of the word fascism, to bundle. Interesting. So there was this bundle of human stretched out figures, and then there was a mock teleprompter, which was a sandblasted piece of glass that said, faggot noun during the Inquisition. It talks about the words word origin from fascism. It says then during the Inquisition, heretics, homosexual, elderly women, and witches were burned at the stake and forced to carry their own kindling for their own immolation. This faggot, however, has survived the fire. Not only has it survived the fire, it has gained its color and strength from the heat it has endured.
Like the phoenix.
Like the phoenix. Another theme in my work is this phoenix. Another theme is butterflies. All of this change, all this transformation, change. Imago. I'm working on a piece right now called Imago. But anyway, so I did this piece, and the fascinating part, the real art of the piece, was the reaction on opening night. So people would have to approach this podium, and they'd see this word. Well, what was interesting was straight men of 40 years and older would read the first word and they're gone. But then women, or perhaps they were witches, or heretics, or homosexuals, or they could be any of the things that the word applied to. There was an instinct when women read that word and realized that it applied to them. There was an instinctual covering of the heart, of self-protective. It was just fascinating. Anyway, but I realized that the work was polarizing, and it was 50% of the people would walk away from me,
right,
and some would walk toward you, and I realized this is exactly what I don't want to do.
Okay.
And I realized from the beginning that what I wanted my art to do was to bring people together. So I decided, okay, that's the poetry for the sock drawer. You still make it. You don't have to share it with the world. You don't have to be that personal. You don't have to give them everything. But you can deliberately say, I'm only going to show pieces that I think are beautiful and engaging, and that invoke a mood.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I show. Long answer.
No, it's a great answer. Yeah, and I mean, some of the most amazing pieces of art have been provocative and provoking, but it is a particular energy, right, that you're putting out there, and then it can kind of silence your other work if people come up with particular ideas as to who you are and what type of person that you are. So it's interesting. A lot of artists have to make that choice. What type of artist do they want to be? And it sounds like you have really come to the conclusion that you want to be somebody that embraces people, that doesn't push people away, that shows people beauty and wants people to come together based on that.
Mm-hmm. I chose an attitude.
You chose an attitude, and that's very, very interesting. And something that would be good advice to new artists. Which type of artist do you want to be?
And what kind of artist do you want to be?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to be the starving artist? I have too good taste for that. But I know some of my best friends are happy having next to nothing. I couldn't live their lives, right. But I know them to be happy and contented in what they're doing. Mm-hmm. So I had to realize the biggest shock for me was realizing that because my work was going to be big, I knew I had to be public. Mm-hmm. The biggest, I had nothing to say. 20 years ago, I had nothing to say. Mm-hmm. I liked being behind the scenes. Didn't think I had anything to offer other than a set. I made the shell for things. Mm-hmm. The hardest shock for me was realizing that I had to be public. Mm-hmm. And I got very public for a while. Mm-hmm. And too public. So then I slammed the other way and I moved my studio to a spot nobody could find. Mm-hmm. And so I've realized, okay, there's an arc to everything. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of your pieces seem incredibly challenging to not only create, but then to move around and to put together at all these different places. You've had work at Disney, a Michigan State University.
Oh, and 13 botanical garden shows, Epcot twice. I did the ornament for the National Christmas Tree from the state of Michigan. That was a great honor.
Very cool.
I've been to Sri Lanka. We built a studio in Sri Lanka. A gentleman in Sri Lanka found me and brought me to Sri Lanka for a month, and my crew and I taught how we think about glassmaking to people who are still replicating it today.
Yeah, and so what has been your most challenging piece to either create from scratch or to move around?
The next one. Moving them, my accountant said that the last show we used 2.5 miles of bubble wrap.
Oh, gosh.
So everything comes apart. What people don't realize is, and I do all the bulk of the stainless steel work on the sculptures I've done myself. I've worked with other metal people, but all the new stuff I'm welding all the steel myself. It's kind of become. I used to at one point I had 9 employees, and no more. Not going to be that guy ever again. So doing these big shows, I have a core group of very loving, trusted people that I've worked with for years. But we're all getting old. So I'm doing this one last show at the Museum of the Shenandoah Valley. And then I don't know if I'll do another garden show. I may sell all the work as a bulk to a company that can exhibit it for me. This is just so different than what I thought my career in the arts was going to be.
And so, speaking of that, what would be your advice for up-and-coming artists? What they could expect that might be different than they assume?
Assume nothing, because you're wrong. Whatever everybody told me from the beginning, what my path was going to be, and every single one of them was wrong. It was my path that worked for me. I did not become the factory that everybody wanted me to become. But what's worked for me, I had to be a professional artist because I had to take care of myself. Almost every amateur artist longs to be a professional artist, but every professional artist longs to be an amateur artist again.
That's interesting.
Once you have to be a business, once you have to, meet all your needs through it instead of just it feeding your soul. It's got to feed your body and your family too. Every professional artist longs for the day that they don't have to put a dollar sign on anything ever again.
Especially when you have 9 employees that you're then...
That I was taking care of.
Yes.
So I've had a great sense of responsibility to, I was helping to feed people and take care of people. And the burden of that actually took away from the glass. So for several years, I was a factory. And this is what everybody was saying, oh my God, you've made it. And I'm like, really? Then why am I this unhappy? Why am I, punching a clock, and why am I dealing with employee theft and all the 64 tax filings a year that you have to do as a corporation, and forms and things. I hate forms and things. So all of that is now past me. So now I lease my shows. That was a big thing to realize, that I could lease my shows.
Yeah, tell us a little bit more about that. I don't think a lot of artists consider that or explore that enough. Once
I had a large enough body of work, I realized that botanical gardens are what they're looking at. And a lot of it is realizing, okay, what are they looking for? What's other people's motivations? Really dive into other people's motivations. And I realized that these botanical gardens are looking to increase attendance. So if you've got something like my work that's garden-based, I know how to transport it, I know how to install it, I know how to not damage the gardens doing it. They can pay me a good price to install 30 sculptures in the gardens, because they're going to increase the attendance by hundreds of thousands of people. So, like on my Missouri show, they told me that it was a separate $29 admission to get in to see the glass, and I think it was 130,000 people who did this.
Wow.
So I made them a lot of money.
Yeah.
And I was a factory, and that's when I realized I don't want to do this anymore. So I took 3 years off and didn't do another show.
Wow, 3 years. That's a long time. And so was your Disney experience similar to that, or how did that come about?
Disney was, again, a lease.
Yeah.
So what I did with Epcot Center was serendipity. Once again, man, somebody's, I don't know, Siri in the sky is paying attention and giving me what I asked for. So that happened. That was 2013. And I'd done a couple of these garden shows and leased them, and realized, okay, I can make a living doing this. And I said, well, let's send out some more of these pamphlets that I had made of the work. And I had just developed these gorgeous poppies. And I said, well, let's send these out to some more botanical gardens. I said, so I listed like 10 that I thought I could drive to with trucks. And I said, and send one to Head of Horticulture, Epcot Center, Orlando, Florida. Well, we did. And it landed on the desk of the head of horticulture for Epcot Center just before there was to be a meeting about how to promote. They were doing a garden for the Great and Powerful Oz, which features poppies.
Yeah, and you had just happened to do poppies.
And it happened to be on the cover of this brochure that we had made that happened to land on her desk the day before the meeting, where they were going to decide what to do. And then they saw these poppies that looked like the ones in the movie. So they called, and we came up with a lease agreement. And Disney treated me like a movie star. It was a lovely experience. And so they leased the work. I installed the work. They treated us beautifully. And then the next year they asked me to do the entrance of Epcot. So I did a huge butterfly sculpture in the butterfly house and filled it with all these flowers, and did pieces for the entrance. So we had a lot of glass there. And then I was a paid speaker for Disney. That was interesting. Didn't realize that you could that I could do gigs like that as well. So that became completely unexpected.
Did you get to see the underground tunnel?
I got to see the guts of everything. It was cool. And I got to ride the Tower of Terror. Like, I got the black card, so I could just go to the front and just drop again and again.
I worked at Disney for a while, so I got to see the tunnels too. It's pretty cool. It's amazing.
Did they teach you to make just the right smile?
Oh, we had to have just the right smile. You have to point a specific way. There's there's a whole thing, and it was definitely an experience. I love Disney. I think it's magical, and I can completely see how your work woodwork there so well. And when you're talking about the Wizard of Oz, I'm just thinking about Munchkin City and just how many how your pieces would just go in there so beautifully.
And one of the pieces, because we got the backstage tour of It's a Small World ride, and they had the poppies from the Wizard of Oz movie, and I got close enough up to them that I could see how they were manufactured and and I thought, so then I made hollyhocks based on the hollyhocks from that movie that were at Dow Gardens.
Wow, so cool.
And
so
we'll be out now.
Very cool. So what do you like to do when you're not working with glass, just for fun?
Garden and cook. Play with the dog.
Yeah, you have a great dog.
We have a great dog named Loyal.
I got to meet your dog. He's adorable.
But I love to get my hands in the dirt.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm in the studio and I'm not just making glass. There's sometimes I love to play with plaster. So I'll be sculpting. Cool. So I sculpt in plaster. So I'm working on some pieces with making armatures and realizing, this is a kind of an over. People often use it. I've used plaster just as I make plaster molds all the time. So I make negatives that I will then fill with glass. And I've just recently been playing in plaster positives and realizing, well, I've got all the welding equipment here. I can weld a frame. I can play with plaster. I'm getting quite a feel for wet plaster now. So I now have got the feel for metal and glass and plaster. So there's 3 materials I'm now competent in.
Will we be seeing some of those pieces?
I don't know.
Ooh, I'm excited. I have to see those pieces.
It would be. I just think that would be a great thing to teach and to play with. It's an inexpensive material. Glass is precious. Glass is expensive. Yeah. You need thousands of dollars to get into doing anything with glass. But chicken wire and plaster, that's accessible.
Yeah. So is it the same type of thing, natural organic pieces, or are you doing some...
Right now I'm just playing with the media, so I'm seeing how self-supporting it can be.
Okay.
And what I've got to do, because I always want to go big.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm already thinking, okay, now I know the physics of glass, but how do I, and then you have to do things and let them sit long enough to know if they're going to survive time.
Right. So if you have them outdoors or whatever the case may be.
Or if there's going to get structural cracks in something 6 months later, you better know that before somebody pays you for it.
Right. Or leases it out for you or whatever. But this has been such a lovely conversation. I feel like I've learned something for sure. And I'm a big fan of your pieces. I just think they're beautiful. So thank you for taking time and coming to talk to me for the Circle Arts Gallery.
Anything I can do. This has been a lovely experience here. The Circle of the Arts has been so kind and helpful and open and introducing me to people. We've been up here now 6 years, but we've stayed very quiet and we didn't know anybody up here. And now I feel like I'm so pleased with who we have met here. It's completely changed. We have a group of friends here now that most of them have been made because of connections here at the Circle of Arts.
So you've been in northern Michigan for 6 years?
We came up here 6 years ago. I only moved the studio up here last December.
Okay. Where were you before this?
Lansing.
Okay. So always in Michigan?
Yeah, well, I spent 8 years in Oregon.
Oh, okay. Very cool.
And bounced around. I did a lot of things.
Cool. Well, I'm glad that you're getting to know us all because we are enjoying you very much. So.
Well, I'm going to spend the rest of my life here, so I'm glate it's working.
Oh, okay.
Because I just love it here. I just love Northern Michigan. I've been vacationing up here since the 90s. And then we found this place up here 6 years ago. And like I've heard many people say, you think it's just going to be maybe a weekend or a vacation place, right. And then you find yourself saying, "Oh, I could spend another day." So, let's do three days in Charlevoix, and 5 days, and then it's 5 days in Charlevoix and 2 days, and then and then we realize now we live here.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we moved here 2 years ago, so we're new to the area as well, and the water is just. I love the water. I love seeing it everywhere I go. And like you're saying, it's kind of like a permanent vacation in a way, living within this environment and seeing all the beauty of northern Michigan. It's just lovely. So I'm glad you're here with us now.
Thank you. And our magical little town.
Magical little town, for sure. And you add to that so much with your pieces and seeing them around, seeing your piece outside of the Circle Arts Gallery is wonderful.
It looks like it belongs here, doesn't it?
It looks like it belongs. It's beautiful. I love it every time I see it. So you're adding.
It's a happy color. It's happy work.
Yes. So thank you again.
Thank you.
And if anybody wants any more information about Craig, you can check out the description box below and find that there. Thank you so much. Bye. Thanks again for watching Charlevoix Circle of Arts Creators Corner. Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel and hit the bell down below to be notified of our next video premiere. These are 2 easy ways to show Michigan artists just how much we appreciate their contribution to our beautiful state.